Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're continuing our coverage of Star Wars Rebels Season 2. Today we're talking about episodes 8, 9, and 10. All that and more after commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. I'm Matthew, your host. I'm joined by Mr. Riki Hayashi. Sarah's not feeling too well tonight, but we do have Riki here. Riki, how are we doing today?
Well, I'm excited to be talking about Rebels. I am also kind of excited about Book of Boba Fett. But that's a different part of this universe.
It is a different part of this universe, and we're kind of holding back on these Rebels episodes. I'm not sure exactly when this will go out, but at the time we're recording, we've just finished watching Chapter 6 of Book of Boba Fett has come out. We're getting ready to go into Chapter 7. But just because we haven't gotten to have you on, let me just start by asking. So overall, kind of how are you feeling about Boba Fett?
I like it a lot. There are elements of it that I am kind of skeptical of or questioning. Like, at this point, the last 2 episodes, we've gotten very little of Boba Fett. It kind of did a sidetrack into The Mandalorian, which is, I love that character. I want to know more, and it was exciting. But I'm wondering, like, why did they do that? I personally don't really need a reminder of that. Bringing him in to help Boba Fett and Fennec Shan is fantastic, but I don't think we needed like a whole 2-episode arc for him to do that. They could have just called him up and said, "Hey, come to Tatooine."
Yeah, that's fair. I'm loving it. I'm kind of thinking that to some extent what we might be getting is like turning all of this into kind of an ensemble show, in that, like, one of my frustrations often with both the Netflix MCU verse, but even more so the Disney Plus verse, is all these shows were supposed to be happening at the same time in the same universe, but they never really overlapped or interacted much. And I kind of like that, like, you know, maybe to some extent we need to stop calling it Mando or Book of Boba Fett and just call it, like, you know, Tales of the Bounty Hunters, whatever, and just sometimes you get a Mando arc, and sometimes you get a Boba Fett arc, and sometimes you get a Fennec Shand arc, and sometimes you'll get a Paul Sun-Young Lee flying his X-Wing as a traffic cop arc, you know?
So I agree that it's fun to have this connected web of shows. However, this is similar to a problem I'm having with the DC Arrowverse television shows, is that right now I'm watching Legends of Tomorrow to catch up on it, and then every season the Arrowverse does a crossover where they all come together for a big, you know, quote unquote crisis, like in the comics, and some of them have been called crisis. But if you were watching like Legends of Tomorrow all the way through and you get to the crossover episode, it's hard to follow as a one of, because what they do on the TV show is each show that week is part of the crossover, so you have to watch, you know, like in order, like Flash, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, Batwoman. And so if you only watch the Legends episode, it kind of doesn't make sense unless you watch them all together. And especially on Netflix, there's no way for me to do that. I would have to look up, you know, what episode number of each show that is that season and kind of go and try to watch them individually. And it's very disruptive to, you know, binging a show. And I don't want the Star Wars stuff to go down that path where it's like, if you are just watching Book of Boba Fett and then you get to these 2 episodes and you're like, who's this Din Djarin? Who's Grogu, right? Like, if you haven't somehow watched those shows, it would be very disruptive to the narrative. I mean, it is disruptive to the narrative as is.
I can see that. I feel like I definitely agree with you about the Arrowverse. I think I didn't mind as much as you did, because I just love the crossover stuff so much, especially when they let Supergirl and Flash start singing together. But that's just because I love them both on Glee, those 2 actors from Glee. But I feel like at least this, it's not like it is sequential seasons, you know, so it's like you're never going to be in a situation where you have to like watch 4 episodes of Mando and 4 episodes of Boba Fett. It's just, you know, you watch a full season of Mando, a full season of Boba Fett, a full season of, you know, Mando, et cetera, et cetera. And I think for me, it wouldn't make sense to have Mando just show up on Tatooine without giving us all of this backstory stuff. But I can definitely see. I think it's a fun new way. I think they're finding a new way to explore it that I hope is going to address some of the concerns you have, but I certainly think it can fall into those concerns. I mean, it's it's experimental. We'll have to see where it goes.
For me, the first episode was okay because like he comes back to Tatooine because Peli has told him, I got a ship for you, and they fix a ship, and all the action takes place on Tatooine, right? Like he goes through Beggar's Canyon, and we get that callback to the pod race, which fits with the whole Naboo fighter as well.
Right.
Then the second episode goes off and does the Grogu stuff. And that's when I was like, this is too much. This is too much Mandalorian.
Fair.
On this show.
I loved everything about that episode that I just didn't care. But I can totally see where you're coming from. Well, so what have you been liking about Book of Boba Fett so far?
Well, I really enjoyed the Tusken tribe stuff. It's I have conflicted feelings, right? Because it is kind of similar to like the Dances with Wolves / Avatar thing where
Last Samurai kind of thing,
yeah, they accept the outsider, and then I did not like that they got slaughtered, right? Like, we use the term fridging often in fandom, originally from comic books, and they just fridged a whole tribe of people that we had gotten to know and like after 2 or 3 episodes. And I wish we had gotten more of those characters, the kid, the tribal leader, the woman who helped him, trained him,
right,
in combat. So I wanted that to be like, when we get to this part where they're like, the Pikes are coming, we need allies, I would have wanted them to still be around and be able to be part of this. And maybe like other Tuskens will be part of it, but it won't be the same as having the Tuskens who helped him.
Yeah, I agree there. And I went through such a kind of mixed journey because at first, when there's that episode where he helps the Tuskens fight off the Pikes on the train, it felt to me a lot like Dances with Wolves, Last Samurai, the outsider who gets to be more Tusken than the Tuskens and all that.
Yeah.
Then with the next episode, like, I hated them being slaughtered like that. To me, though, it did at least do one thing, which is that I felt like it at least redeemed the sort of Last Samurai Dances with Wolves part, because the whole point was that he screwed up. That their deaths were entirely because he didn't know enough about the situation. He did insert himself, trying to be kind of a... Like, it's often a white character with other human racial groups. In this case, he's not white, but it's a human savior complex with non-humans. Yes. But trying to be kind of like the human savior, equivalent to white savior. And so I liked that they critiqued that. It felt to me like a critique of the Dances with Wolves story. But I definitely thought that would mean that, because the number of bodies there were not the number of Tuskens we'd met. And so I certainly thought that he was going to wind up meeting the Tuskens who'd escaped, or there was going to be more Tusken connection in the story. And I've definitely been missing that. And like, I would have loved it if he had gone and like found them again and like had those connections and really developed them as characters for this big battle that's coming in the last episode.
Yeah.
I would hate it if he just rounds up a couple of Tuskens who we never really get to know, and they just become cannon fodder. Because then to me, that would be the exact worst thing.
Like the fact that they recruit Din, and then he in turn recruits Cobb Vanth. I love that connection. And then like missing the Tusken part of that is kind of, where it falls off for me.
The one hope that I have is I know we're getting another show set on Tatooine, granted in a different time period, but the Obi-Wan show is supposed to come this year. So I am very much hoping that show at least will go a lot deeper into exploring Tusken characters and Tusken culture, because, they open up this wonderful door, and it's been frustrating that I haven't gone through it further. Yeah,
I think the portrayal of the Tuskens was more respectful than they have been in the past. You know, a la Anakin just slaughtering them and Padme being okay with it.
Right.
It is one of the most problematic things in Star Wars, in my opinion. Because, like, how is she just like, oh, yeah, you just, like, genocided a tribe? Because, I mean, he was mad, And certainly, like, that is a feeling to be explored. But yeah, I think they treat, in that movie, Attack of the Clones, they treated the Tuskens as subhuman and not worthy of respect. And that was a problem.
Yeah, most definitely. So, yeah, and we'll definitely, we're doing coverage of the Book of Boba Fett also on this podcast. Hopefully you've heard those episodes already, but if not, check them out. But once the show is done, we're definitely going to get Sarah and Riki back to talk in depth about that show and kind of go over it, because I think there's so much, we'll go in deeper. But today we are talking about Rebels, so we will kind of jump back in history. Back, because that story is taking place about 9 years after the Battle of Yavin. We're jumping back about 13 years to like 4 years before the Book of Yavin. And we've got 3 good episodes that are kind of, they're each individual standalone episodes, but I think they're all kind of just more great storytelling. This season 2, I think, is where Rebels really hits its stride as being just a great show. What are kind of your overall thoughts on these 3 episodes before we're going to dive into each one individually?
I think we're establishing that I am the lover of tech in Star Wars. So we get a really fun tech episode in this one, where we are introduced, I guess, to the Interdictor cruiser.
Right.
So we'll talk about that. I am very excited about that one. And then there's some other stuff that happened. I don't know.
So, all right, let's go through episode by episode. So the first one is called Blood Sisters. The summary is, Sabine is sent by Hera to acquire an unknown information courier. She goes with Ezra and Chopper, and they find that the courier is a clunky droid. They then encounter Ketsu Onya, voiced by Gina Torres, fantastic actress, an old friend of Sabine's, who works as a bounty hunter and is now after the droid. When some stormtroopers begin to fire at them, Sabine and Chopper steal a ship and go off planet with a droid, unfortunately with Ezra left behind. Ketsu also escapes, and after a confrontation with Sabine with her personal ship, captures Chopper, and the two meet up to trade the droids. Their activity draws the attention of an Empire ship, and the two team up to escape by setting charges on the stolen ship. Sabine is knocked out and almost left to go with the ship, but Ketsu saves her, and the explosion allows them to fly the droid to a rebel location, and then meet back up with Ezra and Hera before Ketsu leaves on better terms with Sabine. What do you think?
Yeah, this one establishes some good backstory for Sabine, that she was at the Imperial Academy, and her and Ketsu, I guess, went AWOL together.
Yep.
And joined Black Sun, or tried to join Black Sun as bounty hunter / assassin / general bad doers.
Right.
And then
Black Sun, for those who don't know, is yet another of these criminal syndicates that we met quite a lot in Clone Wars, but also has been a little, I think, primarily in the Clone Wars. It was Darth Maul had come to run it.
Yes. And all these names, I get so confused because it's Black Sun and then Crimson Dawn, right? In the Solo movie. So it's like color, some form of the sun's position. Yeah. So someday we'll get like, blood red sunset or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Blue moon. Blue noon.
Oh, blue moon.
Yeah. I like this episode a lot. It's interesting because the main story is very much a cliche, but it's not a bad one. I mean, maybe I'll call it a trope, but it's one that I quite like, which is you've got a character who's joined our heroes, but they have a past with a capital P.
Yeah.
And then someone comes from their past and kind of doesn't understand why they're on the straight and narrow, and kind of wants them to kind of like, do one last job with them. And like, this is everything from, like in Star Trek Voyager, I just watched an episode where Neelix has someone like has this happen to him, and like it happens again and again, but it's a fun dynamic of, because it's kind of a way of testing like how much has this person left that life behind versus how much are they like fully in this new world that they're getting to. And as it often is, the Ketsu person winds up playing some shenanigans, which kind of traps Sabine into it. And I really like that it shows so much of Sabine's character, I think, showing how she does still have this connection, and that they both were kind of like anti the Empire, but that in some ways she kind of had a journey similar to Ezra's, of she started out just kind of out for herself, but then kind of came to understand that there was a better cause to fight for, and signed up with that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying about the trope, but at least they don't go full into the trope where it's like the past comes and comes to collect, right? Like
Yeah.
you owe me for that time that I saved you, so now I'm
She
here
do-
to collect. And
she never has to betray the
right,
ghost crew. She never has
exactly.
to yeah. So you're definitely right. It doesn't go that far, which is I think another way that I like about it.
Yeah, and in fact, by the end of it, Sabine kind of turns the tables on Ketsu and gets Ketsu to see her point of view.
Right.
And she doesn't fully join the crew, but we will see more of her character later on in the show.
Yeah. It's very much a she doesn't quite say I'll be back, but it's very much said hopefully we'll work with you again kind of thing.
This episode sets up a future ally for them.
Gina Torres is awesome as always. I think she's a great person to play this character. It's a lot of fun.
She for fandom, she's probably best known as Captain Zoe Wash from Firefly.
Right. Yeah. She's been in a bunch of things, but I think that's definitely the thing that we get most. Excuse me. The one question that I had from this though is I have been expecting Sabine is about she feels like she's close enough to Ezra's age that they're part of the kids, and Ezra's flirting with her enough that I think so. If Ezra's 15, I thought she's 17, 18. Was she 13 when she was a bounty hunter? I just don't know.
Right, because she would have had to go to the Imperial Academy, right? Be accepted to it, and at least have some time there, and then wash out, and then be a criminal,
right?
And then join the Ghost Crew. So, yeah, it's kind of a tight timeline. She could still be, in her late teens, I suppose. Maybe early 20s.
The academy has always been presented as kind of like a college. You finish school and you go off to the academy, but yeah, so. But it's not a big deal. But it was definitely something that was a little eyebrow raising of how old is she?
Yeah, at the same time though, we did Ezra infiltrates some cadet academy, right? So I think it's open to interpretation as to what they mean by Imperial Academy and how long that process takes. Because certainly there are younger kids. Yeah,
that's definitely fair. Also fun that we got introduced. The other droid is EG-86. It is a Gonk of the for those who fell in love with Gonk, as many of us did in the Bad Batch. It's that same type. You also saw this type of droid getting tortured in Jabba the Hutt's palace in Return of the Jedi. So we've seen it quite a lot. You did also see Fennec Shan dispatch one without mercy. Yeah. In Boba Fett, which I was quite sad with her about, but.
Gonks are my favorite. Very, very unironically.
Really
they look like trash cans. Originally, the original design was probably just a trash can that they attached feet on or something. And they just walk around kind of awkwardly. And they're just fun. They're always in the background of stuff. Similar to the mouse droid, from the Death Star is another staple of just in the background droid. Yeah. And gets to be kind of a main character in this episode. Doesn't do anything, I guess.
But it's clearly important. And it and Chopper definitely have a nice kind of... It's. I remember in Clone Wars, there were some episodes that were a bunch of droids all working together that were kind of painful. And we haven't had that in Rebels, but we at least get the Chopper, and a Chopper working with another droid is always a lot of fun.
Yeah,
so
you're talking
I appreciate
about
that.
Gascon episodes.
Oh, yeah.
The droid team.
All right, so let's move right past that to, I think, the episode you were talking about, episode 9, Stealth Strike. Do you want to read the summary for this one?
Okay. Stealth Strike. Ezra and Commander Sato are captured when a new Imperial weapon, an experimental interdictor cruiser, generates a gravity well strong enough to pull ships out of hyperspace. Hera sends Kanan, Rex, and Chopper to rescue them using a stolen shuttle, stormtrooper armor, and Rex's knowledge of Imperial codes and protocols to infiltrate the cruiser. Although Kanan's lingering distrust of Rex initially hampers the mission. Ezra and Chopper head to the reactor to sabotage the cruiser, but Rex is captured as he and Kanan escort Sato and his crew to their shuttle. Kanan heads back to rescue Rex, and they deploy an escape pod as Chopper's sabotage causes the gravity well projectors to overload, pulling the other Imperial cruisers towards the interdictor and destroying it.
So, I don't know if you had this reaction, but part of why I was so excited about this, and I'm guessing for you as well, we've talked before about the first real set of the sort of Star Wars novels that are now part of the Star Wars Legends canon. They're not official canon, but they're still very beloved, which are the Heir to the Empire books by Timothy Zahn. And
Yes.
there had been novelizations of the original movies, but these were the first new content. And in those books, one of the pieces of tech that Zahn introduces are these things called interdictor cruisers, which the idea is that they screw with gravity, and so they can pull a ship out of hyperspace. And you think about just how big hyperspace is. There's a bit of eye rolling this narrative, but they're so good in the book that you're fine with it. And I remember when I saw it, it took me a second or two the first time I watched it, but then I started to click, wait a minute, this is from Timothy Zahn. Does this mean we're starting to get parts of that universe? Does this mean we might get Admiral Thrawn? And I don't think I'm spoiling anything because it's all over the publicity for the show. But Admiral Thrawn does show up later, I believe, in this season.
Gasp.
And so to me, this was that first, I think it was very intentional. This was a first indication of it's not exactly going to be the same. We're not making those novels canon, but we are bringing things from those novels into this show. And I was so excited for it.
Yeah, so I'm not. There's some conflicting information about the origin of the interdictor cruiser. As you mentioned, it was very prominent in the Heir to the Empire novel trilogy, but it also appeared in the source book for the Star Wars role playing game, which may have preceded the novels by a year or two. So
it's possible.
It's very possible that someone within Star Wars had developed this and had talked to Zahn about it, while he was writing the novel, and they came out at different times. But whatever, we're talking early 90s. That's when this started, and it's got 4 big half domes on a triangular Star Destroyer type shell, and those are the gravity wells, and it basically simulates the gravity of a celestial body like a star and forces ships to come out of hyperspace, because ships in Star Wars have a safety that prevents them from if you tried to plot a course through a star, you're not going to be able to do that because you're going to get pulled out of hyperspace by your safety because it senses the gravity. And that's what these interdictors do, is they simulate that amount of gravity and literally pull ships out of hyperspace. And for you were saying as to the effectiveness of this, you kind of have to buy into the whole hyperspace lane theory, that you can't just go fly around, at hyperspace everywhere, that there are specified lanes that are safe. Right, they're plotted courses through space around all the stars, and so that's where most people fly. So if you know that there is a hyperspace lane, between Coruscant and Tatooine that is frequented, then you can drop an interdictor cruiser there, turn on your gravity well, and stop whoever's coming through there.
It's kind of the equivalent of cutting down a tree across a major highway, something like that. And I will also say, for anybody who wants to get a lot deeper into the theory and physics and idea of hyperspace, the High Republic books, the ability to build and create hyperspace lanes is actually a very big part of those books. It goes over my head sometimes because I'm just not it seems a little bit like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. But if you're into that stuff, at least to me, but if you're really into that stuff, definitely recommend those books. But yeah, I just so even okay, so we have the awesome tech. Even beyond that, though, there was just so much that happened in this episode.
Yeah, the stuff with Kanan and Rex, for me, continues to be some of the best parts of this season, because all these feelings that we have about the Clone Wars cartoon and the stuff that happened in the prequel movies, it's kind of circling back to that, right? Like clones and Jedi working together. But in this case, they both distrust each other.
Yeah.
Because of the past.
Yeah, there's so much mistrust. And I mean, Kavan even specifically says that it is a kind of like, group feeling. Like, it's not that he has specific things about Rex, it's that he doesn't trust troopers. He hates troopers, I think he says specifically. And it for me, it ties in again something that I'm going to keep coming back to and does actually tie into Book of Boba Fett in a way we'll talk about in a couple weeks. Like, if you think about all the things that Yoda and Obi-Wan and then in the prequels, like all the Jedi Masters were always saying, like, you need to be a good Jedi. Kanan doesn't do any of them. Like, this is emotion all over the place. Kanan has no sense of peace about Rex or the troopers. And I just think it's really interesting because they're not... They're, to me, Kanan, in all these debates about, like, what went wrong with the Jedi, what do the Jedi look like after Order 66, I just think Kanan is such a fascinating character because he is kind of a Jedi, and he's definitely a good, he's a light force user who mostly is able to avoid any temptation of the dark side, but by every standard that Yoda and Obi-Wan and Mace Windu and all of them set, he'd be thrown out of the Order. He's terrible.
Yeah, he's in a relationship with Hera.
Mm-hmm.
Is another factor that would work against him in the Order.
He acts on his attachments to it. I mean, he would have, he goes to Bespin without a single question asked, I mean, he acts on his attachments all the time.
Yeah, because this group is a family to him. And that's one of the bigger messages of this show.
Right. Another thing that I like that this episode did, and this is kind of, I think it's a nice parallel to that, of showing kind of the strain between the former Jedi and the former clones, is you get kind of what's happening on the same dynamic in the Empire, in that there's a tension clearly between the military. Like, you remember from like A New Hope, the military who were like, oh, Vader, that's an ancient religion, your dedication to it, this Death Star is now the more powerful thing. You see that again here, where there's this new admiral who wants to kind of like take control of everything, and he won't believe that Bridger is actually a real threat. He's like, as a Jedi, what's the big deal? We can take care of it. And it's kind of hilarious how wrong he's proven. But I also just liked the, seeing that same tension between the military and like Vader and those who respect the Force.
Yeah, and I thought it was very interesting because the admiral calls Agent Callus, and then Callus is the one who warns him, keep an eye on Ezra Bridger, and the admiral's like, oh, he's just a kid.
Right.
So yeah, like, not just between the military and the Jedi, but even in the military, the Imperial military is very political. You do not necessarily get advanced on the merits of your skill as a tactician or as a leader of your troops. So the people in the Imperial military are always jockeying for position, and if someone else fails, that's actually good for you because that might open up a spot somewhere.
If you think about, for those who've seen Rogue One, the politics between Grand Moff Tarkin and Director Krennic, that's throughout the Empire all this time. Really fun. What else? What else about this episode kind of jumped out at you? Was worth commenting on?
Well, I guess it wouldn't be a tech thing if we didn't talk about the no handrails in the reactor room. As again, like,
the lack of safety protocols anywhere in the Empire, like worker safety, is just not taken care of.
I actually have a new kind of question or complaint about this.
Sure.
Right, Ezra goes into the reactor room. Ezra and Chopper go into the reactor room to sabotage it. Ezra is the distraction while Chopper does the reprogramming of the stuff that eventually leads to the gravity wells overloading. While Ezra is distracting the technicians who were working in there, they just pull out blasters and start shooting at him. The technicians are carrying blasters, Matthew, in the reactor room. Like, that's not safe. Like, why does the average, like, you think about in the modern military,
right?
Like a ship, like a aircraft carrier. You don't just have average people walking around the aircraft carrier with guns, right? Like, those are put away somewhere safe, and you only get them, or only certain people have them at all times.
Right. Yeah, like the person who's doing like the janitorial work at a military base. Like, they might be a soldier, but like they're probably not carrying a pistol with them at that. They don't have the M16 as they're cleaning out the latrines. And granted, the tech work I imagine would be the same thing. It's work the Empire. I don't think there's many unions in the Empire. I don't think like worker safety regulations are it's just not taken very seriously.
Well, I think what this points to is how well known it is, how easy it is to infiltrate an Imperial ship. So you have to constantly worry about saboteurs and rebels. So all your technicians need to carry blasters because
everyone has to be ready.
You never know
at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, speaking of sneaking in, though, I do really like Chopper in disguise. That was a really fun moment.
Oh yeah, the black.
Like Ezra doesn't even recognize who it is. And you do get by the end of this episode a really nice moment of kind of Kanan and Rex. Like I appreciate that the first episode where they had stress, they didn't resolve it immediately. But also, you can't keep it going forever. And so I like that now they've let it have like 3 or 4 episodes where this was a thing. And now in this one, like, they really do help each other. They really come to learn to trust each other. And now, like, Kanan's able to salute him and Rex is able to kind of acknowledge Kanan. And it was a really touching moment, I thought.
Yeah, for me, the touching moment was when Kanan goes back for him while Rex is being tortured or about to be tortured. And the Admiral says something like, "No one will miss you anyway," something like that. And Kanan says, "I will," or "I would."
Yeah, it's definitely a nice moment. Also, is it Commander Sato? Sato or Sato? I forget.
Sato.
Sato. I forget his rank, but he's kind of a dick in this episode. Like, he's really kind of mean to Ezra. He's not... I like that not everybody in the rebellion is a saint, and some people are just, military and they're nose to the grindstone. And like, he's clearly a good fighter and a good tactician, but he's such a contrast to like our gang of heroes. He does not see everybody as a family. He sees this as a military, and we're going to protect our own. But if you fall in battle, you fall, and we've got to win the victory, not go rescue you.
Yeah, and we saw Ezra kind of butt into stuff earlier, right?
Yeah,
on the bridge of a ship and not adhere to the proper the military protocols. So that's a tension that has existed for a bit. Yeah, and I also feel like there might be a little bit of anti-Jedi bias.
I mean, I think that definitely is, and by the end, again, Sato has also kind of seen the light, because by the end he's like, cause Ezra just like mows down a whole group, and at the end, he's like, okay, Ezra, you can do this.
Yeah,
like,
and I think Sato, prior to this, understood and at least respected Kanan, but then like, this kid, like, you're telling me this kid is special? No, come on, like, there was some of that.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, anything else on this episode?
In addition to the fun tech stuff, this episode was really funny, I thought. Yeah. There were a lot of jokes in here that kind of broke the fourth wall and played, winked at the audience, in my opinion.
They at one point say, they're putting on stormtrooper armor, and they say this armor doesn't protect us from anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just like, yes, thank you. Finally acknowledge it. That armor is totally useless.
There was that. I think Rex takes off the helmet, and he's like, I can't see out of this thing. And yeah, like, those parts, just like, why are the stormtroopers like this? Yeah, it was very funny.
There was so much of that. There's a lot of just Chopper being Chopper in both. I mean, he kind of almost gets Ezra killed. He's kind of, also kind of terrible, but in hilarious ways that just really fit what Chopper is supposed to be.
There was also a line earlier when they are talking about the rescue mission. Like, we'll go in this stolen Imperial shuttle. And I'm like, why do they keep letting us steal these things? Right? Like, these kinds of shows, there's always a stolen vehicle. You know, you've always got the other team's armor on hand so you can go in disguise. And it just kind of, you know, winks at the audience about those things.
Exactly. All right, let's jump into our last episode of the day. Episode 9. No, I'm sorry.
10?
Episode 10, yeah. Ahsoka informs Kanan. Let me do that again. All right, so let's jump into episode 10, the last one for today. Ahsoka informs Kanan that she's continuing her investigation on the Sith Lord Darth Vader, but finding information on him is difficult. In the meantime, she receives word of 2 sets of coordinates that cross the Imperial net. She heads to look into one of them while dispatching Kanan, Ezra, Zeb, and Chopper to the other. Ahsoka arrives at her location first, a ransacked passenger ship adrift in space, and finds signs of weapon damage all over. The lone survivor, a grandmother, claims that 2 Red Blades kidnapped her grandchild from her and disappeared. Ahsoka informs the team at their destination on a distant planet that the 2 Inquisitors are involved. Zed and Chopper locate the Inquisitors' fighters at the spaceport and reclaim the baby stored in one before destroying them, while Kanan and Ezra find the distressed mother of the second child, who's an Ithorian, by the way. The race that was formerly referred to as Hammerheads, but we are using their proper name, the Ithorians. Chopper takes the first child to the Phantom Shuttle, while Zeb encounters the Inquisitors on the street after relieving a fleeting droid of the second baby. Kanan, Zeb, and Ezra discover that the children are Force-sensitive and were targeted by the Inquisitors to ensure they do not become Jedi. They attempt to lose the Inquisitors through a housing block on their way back to the shuttle, but they're overpowered by them. Ahsoka appears and easily defeats both of the Inquisitors while the rest escape, using the Force to jump up and join them in the shuttle as it passes overhead. The rebels escape, but not before one of Seventh Sister's probe droids hears Ezra say they're going to the planet Garel.
Garel, I think.
Garel, thank you.
Thank you.
My pronunciation is names, planets, all of it.
And I need to correct this summary. It
Go
says,
for it.
Ahsoka appears and easily defeats both of the Inquisitors. Ahsoka appears and just absolutely goes off and kicks their butts, is what happens. It is one of my favorite scenes, I think, from all of Rebels. When the doors open to the hangar bay, I think it's maybe like even a little foggy or there's some smoke, and then Ahsoka comes out of it with her 2 blades, 2 white blades. It's just beautiful, and then she just
it's very much
clowns on them.
Vader at the end of Rogue One, that was then mirrored with Luke at the end of Mandalorian Season 2. Yeah, it's definitely that kind of like, this is kind of our, well, not with Vader, but like our hero has arrived, but also it's kind of terrifying. Like,
yeah.
And you're right. It go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if you have lightsabers, invest in a smoke machine and just carry it around wherever you go.
I like it. And I think I love things like this where like you establish one person's level by showing what someone else can do, you know? Compared to, Kanan is a very capable Jedi.
Nice, yeah.
But I think we forget sometimes that like Kanan's last time training with someone else was when he was like 7 or 8 years old. Whereas Ahsoka, like, trained with Anakin well into her days as a Padawan. Like, I think they were starting to talk about her maybe being ready to train to leave being a Padawan and become a Jedi Knight at the time that, you know, she had to leave the Jedi Order. And she is just, like, Kanan does his best, but Kanan is good enough to, like, hold them off so they can escape. And then Ahsoka comes in and is just so clearly so much above where Kanan is, especially compared to them. And it's also nice to see them that, like, we've been seeing them look, you know, they're kind of the JV squad, you know, and against amateurs, they look great. But when someone like Ahsoka comes in, it's game over.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because to me, that just reminds me of classic Dragon Ball stuff, where you have the group of etc. characters, Yamcha, Tenshin Han, Chaozu, Kuririn, and they have their adventure and they beat some of the, you know, like mini bosses. But then you get to the big boss and they all get defeated, and, you know, like Vegeta has to show up. And then Goku has to show up, right? Like, so yeah, absolutely. Like establishing that these villains are the real thing. They defeat Kanan and Ezra handily. And then Ahsoka shows up.
Yeah.
And she takes them both on.
And I think, my memory's not perfect, but am I right that this is the first time, like, since Ahsoka rejoined Rebels, she's often been in the background, she, like, helps out a bit, she is Fulcrum, she gives advice, but we haven't seen her, like, jump into a battle, and I think this is the first time we've seen her lightsabers, and that her lightsabers are white.
Yeah.
Am I right about
correct.
that?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's all sorts, I mean, there's all sorts of debate about why the lightsabers are white that you can get into. But I think clearly it's supposed to represent in part that she is a Force user. She's on the light side, but she is not a Jedi. Or at least that she's distinctly different, because these are not the lightsabers. In part because remember at the end of Clone Wars, she buried her lightsabers at the crash because she wanted the Empire, including possibly Anakin / Vader, although she didn't even know that about him, but she wanted the Empire to think that she died. So yeah, so she had to make new lightsabers.
Yeah. And the Ahsoka novel is considered canon. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we know that's where she gets these lightsabers. She is on a planet and defeats 2 Inquisitors there and takes their lightsabers and frees the kyber crystals of their corruption. So it kind of establishes that the Sith corrupt kyber, and that's why they turn red.
Right. So yeah, these are kind of like purified. So like they've lost all their color. They're just pure white.
Yeah.
So,
but it is also visually, I think, works well with what you're saying about her not really being on either side.
Right. Yeah, she's definitely fairly distinct there.
In the same way that at the end of Rise of Skywalker, I really loved that Rey's lightsaber was yellow, and it suggested a new path forward.
I'm going to choose not to engage because I like that one point, but I feel like the whole rest of the movie betrays that. It's part of why I hate that movie so much, because I feel like the rest of the movie betrays that. But that's a discussion for another time.
Hate is such a strong word.
You know it is, but sometimes you just gotta. I appreciate that people love it. I will never say you're a bad Star Wars fan for liking it. I'll never say anyone's wrong for liking it. I just it makes me, like, thinking about it makes me angry. Anyway.
But that's why you have to think about the parts that don't make you angry. And I, at least I hope that you're like me. Like, I loved seeing that yellow lightsaber. And I love that they don't explicitly, like, say why it's yellow. And it leaves something for us to be like, interpret for ourselves. Like, this is what I think that means.
To me, I wasn't able to get that because I felt like she had so clearly put herself as a Jedi, you know, so that there wasn't any, like, again, this is a longer discussion, but yeah, there are some definite moments in that movie that I loved. I get why that moment would be very powerful for someone who had enjoyed some of the stuff up to that. For me, everything about how she had kind of been, like, anointed by the Jedi and, like, the one true Jedi as just as though the second movie just didn't exist. The color of her lightsaber just it didn't fit. It just didn't work for me. But anyway, if I don't want to claim to have the last word. If you want to respond to that at all, go ahead, and then we can pull back to Rebels.
No, I mean, I enjoyed it. That's all I want.
No, it's awesome. I'm glad you did. I'm really glad you did. And it is fun to see. Like, I think there definitely is a connection there, and it is fun to see more Jedi or more lightsaber uses getting to play with things that aren't just blue, red, and green, the way we often have.
And purple.
And purple, something like that. And purple, to be sure. All right. Anyway, so pulling us back to this. Let's also talk about Zeb. Like, we haven't really gotten an episode that focuses on Zeb, and we don't really get much of his backstory or anything like that. It's not like a complete Zeb episode, but there's a nice kind of like 5-minute series where Zeb is dealing with the with the baby, because Zeb to me is the epitome of the grumpy old uncle, you know, who will be like, babies, I don't want to deal with a kid. I don't know what to do with a kid. But will be wonderful with kids, you know? And there's a great thing with him rescuing the kid and then him dealing with the Inquisitors. And I just really liked getting to see a lot of Zeb time.
Yes, Zeb we've been missing Zeb for a couple of episodes,
Mm-hmm.
and this was a good way to come back to him and to establish more of his character, that he's not
Mm-hmm.
just the muscle of this group. I think
Mm-hmm.
it is slowly developing that he really is kind of the heart in some ways of
Yeah.
the group.
Yeah, I think so. And he's very grumpy about it, but he really is, you know. And so that was really fun. You get this whole thing about how Jedi are supposed to be good with kids because they can make a connection with him, and so Ezra has some connection, but that was kind of fun. Falling damage just doesn't seem to exist in Star Wars.
Oh,
Like we once
definitely
again have people jump off a roof, fall 50 feet, land in a speeder, and are totally okay. I don't get it. It makes no sense, but fair enough.
And again, like some fun humor where they land in the speeder, and I think Zeb is the one who says something about like, oh, like you had us land in a speeder, like great plan. And Kanan's like, no, it was just a coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, Kanan was just like, look, if we stay in this room, we're definitely going to die.
Yeah.
If I jump out this window,
Something
least we're not-
different.
yeah, it's that kind of like we're going to jump off this bridge and then we'll deal with the next problem. The problem is that we'll be falling, but we'll deal with that one next, you know? So I did appreciate that.
Right, and that is the kind of thing that happens on TV shows and movies all the time. Although it's usually a truck, an open bed truck with trash in the back.
Yeah.
To soften the landing.
And I will say the absolute best version of that is in Better Off Dead, a 1980s, just a fantastic like teen comedy romance. It's kind of a satire of all of them. John Cusack gets thrown out into a garbage, falls very far, but he lands in a garbage can, and a couple of garbage workers watch this happen. Like, ain't it a pity? Throwing out a perfectly good white boy. It's just a hilarious moment in the movie. Anyway, we're on tangent land. It's funny that we've talked about this episode, but we haven't talked like the main kind of theme of this episode is kind of horrific. Like not in like I'm upset at it, but you know, just kind of like the depravity and depth that the Empire is falling to, that they're kidnapping babies because they're force sensitive to try to kind of like steal them for, you know, make sure they don't become Jedi.
Yes. Well, this is an ongoing theme for Sheev's Empire.
Right.
In the Clone Wars, there was a couple of episodes, or one episode where he hires Cad Bane to go steal some potential younglings and takes them to Mustafar.
Right.
And for those of you who are now, you know, catching up on the doings of Cad Bane, that's one of the things that he did. Is he kidnapped babies. And I am very against Star Wars, the Star Wars universe, calling people like him bounty hunters. He's not a bounty hunter, y'all. He's just a straight up mercenary, assassin, and terrorist. Yeah.
Yeah, he is a criminal for hire. If you want him to hunt a person and then pay him for it, then technically he's gotten a bounty. But, you know, and I'm sure like he's like, because there's licenses for bounty hunters. I'm sure he got started as that. But then quickly people realized like he doesn't have a code. He doesn't have you just, you know, you pay him enough, he'll do whatever you want.
Yeah. The video game Jedi Fallen Order dealt with a holocron that had information on the whereabouts of all the, well, I don't know about all, but lots of potential Force users in the galaxy. There was also a comic book that I don't know if it's canon, but it deals with a similar thing right after the fall of the Republic.
Right.
It's probably canon because it features the Grand Inquisitor. I believe the Grand Inquisitor breaks into the temple and fights the librarian, Jocasta Nu, over the whereabouts of this holocron.
Yeah, I think I remember not reading that, but reading about it. And it's also just nice because I think it's another one of those, a lot of the things that Rebels especially is doing, and Bad Batch did this too, in gentle ways they're retconning some things that didn't quite fit. You know, because, for example, if you just watch the prequels and then the original movies, you kind of get the sense that, like, Order 66, not only did they kill all the Jedi, but they killed the whole possibility of people becoming Force users, because it's sort of like Luke and Leia are the only two ones who could even become Jedi. And so I like that this is like, yeah, no, I mean, those were the ones who they knew about, and they were Skywalkers, but there's actually a lot of kids are still being born with Force powers.
Yeah. Well, as long as they keep putting midichlorians in the water. Oh, whoops.
Oh boy. I do also really like that. Clearly, what the Sith are doing is far worse than anything the Jedi have ever done. But stealing babies from their families to either make sure they're not Jedi, but even more so, maybe raise them as your version of Force users. The Jedi, get the permission of the parents, in theory, when they basically take babies and toddlers away to go raise them as Jedi.
Yeah.
But in a lot of the stories, they also kind of make clear that, not the most consensual kind of situation in terms of, parents feeling a lot of pressure to do it, or, they're going to harm their child by doing it. So,
or, hand waving, literal hand waving, right? Wave my hand, your child will be safe with us.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, at that point, there's no consent whatsoever. It's just mind control. And so I did, have you kind of look at what the Sith are doing. You're like, that's horrific and that's wrong, and that the Jedi wouldn't. No, the Jedi kind of did that. Not to the same degree, to be sure, but something like this, yeah.
Yes, the Jedi did not murder everyone else on the ship.
Yeah. And then you do get, though, at the end, just to kind of, we saw Zeb is good with kids, though he doesn't want to be. Ezra can, mind touch, I guess, through the Force some of these kids, but he's not the best. But in the last couple scenes, it's never mentioned, but we see the two babies being held and danced around and spun around, and they're both laughing and giggling by the best babysitter in the Star Wars universe, Chopper. And that made me very happy.
Good stuff.
Yeah. All right, I think that's about all I had for this episode. Anything more you had on this one, or just these episodes in general?
Nothing really. I mean, I guess just I love having the seventh sister confronting Kanan just because of the voice actors. Mm-hmm. Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr., real life couple.
Oh, I hadn't even connected that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
How do you think she got on this show? I don't know, actually. But
I mean, it
wouldn't surprise me if he's like, hey, we got this gig.
Yeah, no, I could see that. So, all right. Well, Riki, this is one I always ask for people who want to hear more of your stuff. I know you're tweeting every now and then. Should I even do a promo thing for you, or should we just skip it?
I don't know. Skip it.
Okay. All right. Well, Riki, as always, thank you so much. So Sarah couldn't join us, and I hope she's feeling better. But it was great to have you on. To our fans, what do you all think about what we talked about? How are you loving this show? If you're seeing it for the first time, kind of watch along with us. If you've already seen it before, or if you haven't seen the show, but you're just following along, listening to us, would love to hear your thoughts. You can find all our contact information by going to theethicalpanda.com. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, email. Would love to hear from you. There you can also find information on all the other podcasts I do. Check all of that out. You can check out all the other great podcasts we're a part of on the Stranded Panda Podcast Network. So on behalf of myself, Riki, thank you all so much for tuning in, and have a great day. There we go.